Welcome to Module 3 of the Administration Code Regulation 703 KAR 5080. My name is Shara Savage. I'm a consultant in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. Module 3 will focus on appropriate assessment practices and classroom materials. Please note, the page numbers on the slides represents the information found in the regulation document itself. It's time to look at appropriate assessment practices, such as the required training for administering a state assessment. The Administration Code applies to all state-required pieces of the accountability system using paper or pencil and computers or digital technology. Any person with the potential to be involved with any component of state-required testing must be trained on the Administration Code regulation prior to beginning the work. This could include, but not limited to, principals, off-grade teachers, substitutes, accommodations providers, librarians, etc. Any individual providing accommodations to special needs students must also receive training on the inclusions of special populations regulation. Volunteers who are involved in state testing, such as providing accommodations or helping with proctoring, must meet certain stipulations that also apply to school staff. No student may administer a state assessment. This includes peer tutors. All volunteers must have background and safety checks, receive confidential training, as well as the Administration Code and inclusions of special populations training, and sign non-disclosure forms. The volunteers must be under strong oversight of a certified person who will be responsible for the test administration. If there should be a testing allegation involving a college student, certified person in charge of the testing environment must be submitted on the allegation report. Schools and districts may use materials provided by Kentucky Department of Education or those produced locally. Solely reading the regulation and signing the signature page at the end of the document shall not be considered adequate training. Training shall include interaction regarding the content of the regulation with supporting examples and situations and/or opportunity to ask questions, etc. The intent or the meaning of interaction is the training to be more than simply being assigned to read and sign the document. The DAC manual and TAMs are to be the guiding document for the test administration procedures. Reading the TAMs is expected as part of the required training. Following the vendor test administration manual is of the utmost importance. Districts are charged with maintaining records of individuals receiving the Administration Code training. The participants' records may be maintained through collecting individual signature sheets found on the last page of the Administration Code training regulation document, or by the retention of the group training attendance signature sheets. Copies of the signature page or group training attendance sheet may be maintained in a hard copy or electronic format. A copy of the group signature sheet is available on the Kentucky Department of Education website. Training participants are held professionally accountable for their actions after signing either type of signature sheet. Notice that both sheets state, "By signing, I acknowledge having received a copy of the Administration Code for the Kentucky Educational Assessment Program, 703 KAR 5080, and have participated in training for this regulation. I also agree to comply with the complete content of the regulation and understand that I will be held professionally accountable." Anyone assisting with state testing will sign a non-disclosure form. Assistance including handling of the testing materials, escorting students, providing accommodations, and more. Discussions or sharing test content specifics with others, even though they have been trained and are participating in test administration, is not allowed. Non-disclosure forms can be found on the Forms page in the Accountability and Assessment section of the KDE website. Resources and materials available to students during testing are dependent upon the assessment. Please check with the Test Administration Manual for further guidance on what should be at the student's workstation during testing. During an assessment, test administrators shall not distribute, make available, or attach to students' workstation any information or materials that are not sent as part of the assessment materials or specified in the test administration manuals or in a student's plan. Examples of not acceptable resources include copies of acronym sheets or sheets of paper containing a system for organizing answers, test books, computer tools, or other reference resources. A student's IEP 504 or PSP allows the student to have additional resources not mentioned in the script. Please check with your back concerning accommodations. Blank writing or graph paper, clear or colored overlay sheets, and bookmarks free of content are allowed at the student's workstation. Even though their use are not clearly stated in the state test administration manual, some schools use brightly colored pieces of paper or a district or school supplied bookmark to mark where the testing will stop in this session. Whether or not a dictionary or thesaurus is allowed on the test will be covered in the Test Administration Manual, or TAM. Test administrators should refer to the listing of approved and unapproved materials in the TAM to determine when to provide a resource. On-demand writing is the only content area where a student is allowed to have a dictionary or thesaurus. Online testing provides an electronic dictionary and thesaurus to each student. For paper pencil testing or as a backup for online testing, a classroom set of dictionaries or thesaurus should be made available for the students. Reading, mathematics, science, or social studies content area tests do not allow the use of a dictionary or thesaurus unless clearly stated as an accommodation in a student plan. It is a local decision by schools or districts on whether to allow students to access non-content related materials, such as books or puzzles, after the student has turned in his or her testing materials to the test administrator. Please note that this is after the student has no testing materials at the workstation. Unlike dictionaries or thesaurus, calculators may be used in more than one content area. Check the TAM to determine if a calculator is allowed or if this test section is a no calculator math test. Online testing will provide the student with the type of calculator needed for the test section. It is expected that the student will use the online calculator and not a handheld calculator, unless the student's accommodations plan specifies the use of a handheld calculator. Handheld calculators used for paper, pencil, or accommodated testing should adhere to the KDE calculator policy, which is available on the KDE website. Be familiar with the requirements of each assessment that you administer. Some test vendors have their own calculator policy requirements that may differ from KDE's policy. KDE recommends that schools provide calculators for each student that meets the current calculator acceptable use criteria. However, students can use their own approved calculators for the paper-pencil test. Test administrators are responsible for ensuring that the communication and the internet capabilities are disabled during testing sessions. This also includes turning off the computer algebraic system on a calculator. See the KDE calculator policy for details. It is not acceptable for students within the same testing session to share calculators, even if the test administrator clears the program between uses. There should be a 1-to-1 ratio of calculators to students during a test session. Allegation tip: plan ahead of time to have all the necessary related materials, such as dictionaries, thesaurus, calculators, etc., needed for testing both special needs and general education students. Use the test administration manual to check which materials are allowed for a test session. Except in cases where allowed, such as testing online in a secure web browser, students should not have access to electronic devices until all testing in the building is completed to ensure that students are not communicating with other students in testing sessions. Internet access may become necessary in the future for computer-based testing, but it will not be acceptable to use electronic devices or internet to gain a testing advantage. Electronic devices are everywhere and getting smaller every day, making our job of maintaining a fair and unbiased testing environment harder. Except in cases where allowed, such as online testing in a secure web browser, students should not have access to electronic devices until all testing in the building is completed to ensure that students are not communicating with others in testing sessions. In the case of the ACT testing, smartwatches and Fitbits are not allowed, since those devices can connect to the internet. A student may use an approved personal electronic device, such as a calculator, if the device meets the acceptable use criteria, which includes disabling device communication and internet features. It is not acceptable to use electronic devices or the internet to gain a testing advantage. Online testing provides a secure browser to prevent accessing other parts of the internet, therefore not allowing a student to gain an unfair advantage during testing. It is acceptable for test administrators to use electronic devices to contact school administrators regarding test sessions, such as problems with materials, student illness, administration questions, etc. Teachers should be communicating with the building assessment coordinator or designee and not with each other while testing is occurring for assistance with a situation in the classroom. BACs or principals may routinely request that teachers use their personal cell phone to notify the office of a need in the classroom, such as an ill student needing an escort from the room or the test administrator needing a restroom break. However, neither students nor test administrators shall use electronic devices such as, but not limited to, cell phones, tablets, e-readers, for personal reasons during testing sessions, except in the case of emergency. We've looked at cell phones, electronic devices, etc. Let's move on to the testing environment. A few years ago, when this regulation was updated, it was decided that testing room surfaces should be free of content during operational and field testing. Yes, this means bulletin boards, walls, and surfaces. It is acceptable to place instructional materials on bulletin boards, walls, etc. throughout the year, but when the room is in use for testing, those same content materials must be removed or covered. Covered means with a covering that is not see-through or opaque. Some examples of materials are any content information or strategies for problem solving. These may be anywhere in the room, on walls, ceiling, floors, windows, clothing. Yes, I said clothing. When the room wasn't required to be sanitized, there were some schools who were printing t-shirts with content on them for the students. Sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? I can read your back, you can read mine, but what about the poor person in the front row? He doesn't have a shirt to read. He is now at a disadvantage. You could say the same thing about posters. If I was sitting next to a poster that just happened to answer one of my test questions, I had an advantage over the person across the room who was too far away to read the poster. The covering of the room content did get a bit extreme. To make certain that all students have the same resources and advantages, the posters, they had to go. Let's look closer at some of these materials. What can remain on the walls are motivational posters or materials without content and standard periodic tables. Periodic tables? Yes, periodic tables without additional content. If you don't understand how to read a periodic table, it does not give you an advantage. Materials that are appropriate for instruction and display may not be appropriate during testing sessions. Materials that contain content, problem-solving strategies, processes, etc. are unacceptable for display or use during testing sessions. Even things painted on the walls, for example, see the first equation that was painted on a classroom wall, or three-dimensional sculptures or paintings used in a lesson must be covered. This concludes Module 3 of 6 of the Administration Code Regulation. Please review all 6 of the modules to complete the Administration Code training. If you have specific questions about the Administration Code training, Module 3, or any module-related question, please feel free to contact KDE DAC-Info at dacinfo@education.ky.gov or give us a call at 502-564-4394. Thank you for your time and your participation today.